What would you do if you were the last line of defense for your family's legacy? What if powerful people wanted to take everything you had left and you were all alone, or so they thought? Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that family, courage, and justice still matter in this world. This is the unbelievable true story of a single mother, a forgotten farm, and a brother they should have never messed with. They always said the land would outlast them all. The trees had grown tall and heavy with memory. The soil still held the footprints of children who had long become ancestors. And every time the wind passed through the Georgia fields, it whispered the names of the people who had kept this land alive for over 100 years. Jasmine Carter never wanted to be its last protector, but life has a way of choosing people. When they're not ready, it started with a phone call no daughter wants to receive. Her parents, Thomas and Diane Carter, had been found in their pickup truck at the bottom of a shallow creek off Millstone Road. No other vehicles involved, no slippery roads, no explanations. The coroner's report used the word accident 3 times, as if repeating it made it more believable. Jasmine knew her parents. They didn't make mistakes on the road they'd driven every day for 40 years. But there were no witnesses, no camera footage, just a clean report and a closed case. And just like that, she was back in Oak Hollow, standing at the edge of her childhood porch, holding her daughter's hand in one and her son's in the other, staring at a future she hadn't asked for. She had left this place behind more than a decade ago, with a full scholarship and a suitcase packed with dreams. Atlanta was supposed to be her fresh starter city that didn't care where she came from, just where she was going. But now, at 35, she stood on land her great-great-grandfather had purchased with freedom in one hand and a worn-out Bible in the other, trying to figure out how to run a farm, raise 2 kids, and bury 2 parents without losing her mind. Caleb, 13, was quiet like his grandfather, already tall and strong for his age. He didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. Zoe, her daughter, had just turned 9 and asked questions about everything from how seeds grow into trees to why the stars didn't fall out of the sky. For the first few weeks, Jasmine did what all Carter women had done before her. She worked, she fed the animals, she mended broken fences, she harvested the last of the late summer crops. She taught her kids how to plant rows, how to look a person in the eye, and how to trust their instincts when something didn't feel right. What she didn't expect was the silence to turn into surveillance. It began with the white SUV parked just past the edge of her property line. No flashing lights, no one knocking, just a vehicle, idling with tinted windows. It came and went, like a shadow she couldn't name. Then came the visits. The first man was polite, in the way a vulture might be before circling lower. He introduced himself as Dean Morris from Cornerstone Development Group and spoke with the polished ease of someone who had made a career out of convincing people to sell what they never wanted to lose. "We're acquiring land in this region for a sustainable residential project," he said, handing her a glossy brochure filled with digital images of smiling families and artificial lakes. Jasmine didn't even look at the numbers. "This land isn't for sale," she said, voice steady. "You might want to consider," he replied, adjusting his sunglasses. "Offers like this don't come twice." "I'm not interested." Morris paused. "Then maybe we can help you think about it some more." She watched them drive off. The air around her felt different after that, still and heavy, like the kind of calm that comes before a summer storm. "Tears through everything you've built." That night, she found the chicken coop door open. 2 hens were gone. Another had been attacked, feathers scattered like confetti across the ground. She fixed the latch, told herself it was a raccoon. But raccoons don't leave footprints that look like size 11 boots. Within a week, code violations appeared like weeds. A citation for unauthorized signage when her Carter family produce sign had been there for 20 years. A warning about her barn's structural integrity. A notice about pesticide use she didn't even apply. No one ever showed up in daylight, just papers taped to her gate. Reports sent in brown envelopes. Complaints filed anonymously. Jasmine tried to laugh it off at first thought, but then the sheriff showed up. Sheriff Briggs had been in office longer than she'd been alive. Tall, broad, with the slow drawl of someone who liked hearing his own voice echo. He leaned against her fence, arms folded, glancing at the rows of squash and corn like they offended him. "Just checking in," he said. "There've been concerns raised about this property." "Concerns?" he asked. "Zoning issues, safety risks." You know how it is. I know when someone's trying to scare me." Briggs smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This land's changing, Ms. Carter, so is the county. Might be smart to change with it." She stared him down, holding his gaze longer than he expected. He eventually tipped his hat and walked away, but she knew that wasn't the end. Her son, Caleb, came to her that evening holding a strange envelope he found under the porch. Inside was a single photo and aerial image of their land, marked with red lines and numbers. Parcel 54, it said in bold. They weren't trying to buy the land anymore. They were preparing to take it. She called the county office. No answer. She reached out to a lawyer in Atlanta, but the consultation fee alone was more than she had in her checking account. She considered reaching out to friends, but most of them had drifted away when she moved back to the country. Besides, who would believe her? A black single mother accusing a development company and a sheriff of harassment in a county that barely acknowledged its own history. For the first time in her life, she felt something deeper than fear. Alone. And then, one night, after the third drive-by in less than a week, she sat at the kitchen table with her kids asleep upstairs and stared at the name on her old contact list. Malik Carter, her brother. They hadn't spoken in 7 years. When their parents passed, she thought of him immediately, but no one could reach him. The army listed him as discharged. No forwarding address, no trace. Family whispers said he'd been through something overseas. Others said he wanted to disappear. Jasmine tried to believe he was just healing, quietly. But tonight, something pushed her. Maybe it was the sound of tires crunching outside again. Maybe it was the feeling that she couldn't carry this any longer on her own. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed one line. "They're trying to erase us, Malik, and I can't fight this alone." She hit send. No response. 2 days passed. And then, one evening, just as the sky bled into the orange haze of dusk, she heard a sound from the woods behind the property. A rustle, a branch snapping. She reached for the old flashlight on the porch and stepped outside. Her breath caught. A silhouette emerged from the trees, tall, familiar, calm, and around his neck. Dog tags. He didn't say a word at first, just looked at her with eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine. Then his voice cut through the silence. "You called," he said. And Jasmine, strong, steady, stubborn. Jasmine felt something break inside her chest. She didn't cry, not yet, but she whispered one word, and it carried everything. "Malik." Behind her, headlights appeared at the bottom of the hill again, but this time they didn't stop. Because Malik had returned, and whoever was coming next had no idea what they were walking into. The second the headlights rounded the bend at the base of the hill, Malik shifted his stance. Jasmine hadn't seen him in years, but in that moment, it was as if time bent backward, and her big brother, the protector, the fighter, had never left. His posture wasn't threatening. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there, silent and still, like a stone pillar at the entrance of a forgotten temple. But something about him made the night itself seem to hesitate. Jasmine followed his gaze. The SUV was crawling up the long gravel drive, slow and deliberate, its high beams off, as if whoever was inside wanted to arrive unnoticed, even in the open. But there was no hiding from Malik. He stepped off the porch, his boots crunching lightly in the dirt, his eyes locked forward. Jasmine stayed behind him but didn't retreat. Not this time. The vehicle stopped just 20 feet from the farmhouse. The engine idled. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and out stepped a man she hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, tan slacks, a crisp polo, clipboard under his arm. Not a cop, not a neighbor, a scout. "Evening," he called, in a voice too smooth to be friendly. "Didn't mean to interrupt. Just here to talk, Miss Carter, that's all." "She's not alone," Malik said before Jasmine could speak. His tone was low, measured, not loud enough to provoke but impossible to ignore. The man looked at him, eyes flickering briefly to the tags round his neck. A flicker of recognition passed through his expression, quickly masked by a rehearsed smile. "I can see that. You must be the brother," he said, stepping closer. "Glad you're here. Always better when these conversations happen with the whole family." "Name," Malik said. "I'm David Lansing, Acquisition Liaison for Horizon West Properties. We've been in touch with your sister, but there seems to be some confusion." "No confusion," Jasmine cut in, stepping beside her brother now. "I said no." Lansing tilted his head, glancing around at the property as if he owned it already. Look, I understand the emotional attachment, generational farms, family roots, all of that. But this land isn't sustainable anymore, not for one family. We're offering a very generous deal, one that gives you a chance to leave all this struggle behind and start fresh. Malik took a step forward, not aggressive, just close enough to break whatever illusion of authority the man thought he had. She already has a fresh start, he said, his voice just above a whisper. It's here. You just don't like that she didn't ask your permission. Lansing hesitated. His charm was slipping. Well, he said finally, backing up a step, think it over. Clock's ticking. He got in the SUV and drove off without another word. Jasmine turned to Malik the moment the red taillights disappeared. I didn't know who else to call, she admitted, her voice cracked, the exhaustion in her eyes finally surfacing now that someone she trusted was near. You called the right person, he said. That night, after the kids were asleep and the farmhouse had gone quiet, Jasmine and Malik sat at the kitchen table just like they had as kids, when they'd sneak cookies after bedtime and whisper secrets across the wood grain. But tonight was different. Tonight was war planning. Malik had been gone so long she wasn't sure what stories about him were true anymore. There were rumors that he'd done something classified, that he'd disappeared off the grid, that he was dead, and then, the truth, he had made himself vanish because the things he saw overseas had changed him too deeply to return as the same man. I stayed away because I thought I was protecting you, he said, staring at the coffee in his hand. But you didn't need distance. You needed backup. Jasmine looked at him, eyes welling. They're not going to stop, are they? No, Malik said simply. They've already invested in this land, probably got blueprints drawn, contractors lined up. That man wasn't here to offer a deal. He was here to issue a final warning. So what do we do? Malik leaned back. First, we gather information. We figure out who's behind Horizon West, who's backing them, why they're so desperate. And then, we make it very clear they picked the wrong family to pressure. The next morning, Malik walked the full perimeter of the property. He made notes, photographed tire tracks, marked broken branches near the northern fence line, set up trail cams at 4 corners. All quiet, all calculated. Jasmine began documenting everything, too. Every citation, every visit. She started a log on her phone, then backed it up to her computer. Malik encouraged her to talk to the few neighbors who hadn't yet sold. Most were wary, but one, Mr. Eddings, a retired teacher, opened his door and let them in. They came for me last year, he said, offered twice what my place was worth. When I refused, I got code violations I'd never even heard of before. Claimed my well water wasn't up to standard, that my trees were too close to the power line. I've lived here 40 years suddenly. My house is a hazard. You still own it? Malik asked. For now, but they're turning up the pressure. I wouldn't be surprised if someone accidentally started a fire out here one night. When they left, Malik turned to Jasmine. This isn't about money. It's about erasure. And they've done it before. Quietly, legally. They use zoning laws and false reports because it's cleaner than bulldozers. That night, Malik made another call. Jasmine didn't ask who it was, only that the man who answered had a voice, like gravel, and didn't ask for details. He simply said, send coordinates, and hung up. 2 days later, another truck pulled up the drive. Out stepped a woman named Tasha, short, wiry, dressed in tactical pants and a denim jacket. She hugged Malik like an old comrade, nodded at Jasmine, and began scanning the fields like she was preparing for deployment. What's she here for? Jasmine asked. She's the eyes, Malik replied. She sees things we don't, and she doesn't spook easy. The tension around the property shifted. Jasmine felt it. The land felt, watched, not in the creepy, uncomfortable way it had been, but in a way that felt secure, alert, as if it finally had guardians again. But even with their quiet defenses rising, the attacks escalated. That weekend, someone cut the fence on the south end. 3 goats wandered into the road. Thankfully, no cars came, but it was enough to earn her another warning from the county, this time for livestock endangerment. 2 nights later, someone tried to poison the water troughs. The next morning, Malik found the trail cam footage. A man in a construction vest, face covered, moving with practiced efficiency. He downloaded the footage and sent it to 3 different servers. They're not just trying to scare you now, he said. They're setting you up to fail. They want the state to take this land. That way you don't even get a choice. Jasmine sat at the edge of her porch, staring out at the morning mist curling over her crops. She felt something twist inside. Her grief, rage, heartbreak, all braided together. "My kids were born here," she said quietly. "They learned to walk between these rows. My mama planted those apple trees for each of us when we were little. And now some clipboard man thinks he can put a strip mall here." Malik didn't speak. He didn't need to. He stood beside her, tall and unshaken. "Then we hold the line," he finally said. "Not just for you, for everyone they've silenced." And just as he said it, a black SUV crested the hill, again different plates, tinted darker. This time it didn't stop at the end of the drive. It came all the way up, and the man who stepped out wasn't holding a clipboard. He was wearing a badge. The gravel crunched under the black SUV's weight as it came to a stop just yards from the porch. Jasmine stood slowly. Malik stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her, not in a protective way, but in the quiet, deliberate posture of someone who had spent years in places where hesitation cost lives. The door opened. A man in a neatly pressed deputy's uniform stepped out. His boots were polished, his nameplate gleamed, and his sunglasses reflected the early morning sun. He scanned the property with a level of scrutiny that made Jasmine's stomach twist. This wasn't a wellness check. This wasn't even protocol. Wasn't alone. Another deputy stepped out from the passenger side, one hand resting casually near his holster. Behind them, a third vehicle waited at the bottom of the driving mart, but clearly law enforcement. Malik tilted his head, just slightly, as if committing every detail to memory. "Good morning," the lead deputy called out, voice neutral. "But to rehearse, I'm Deputy Rowland with Oakwood County. We received a complaint this morning about possible unlicensed structures on the property and potential zoning violations. Mind if we take a look around?" Jasmine forced herself to breathe evenly. "This is private land," she replied. "You have a warrant." Deputy Rowland gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No need for one just yet. This is a courtesy call. We're here to make sure everything's safe and in compliance. If not, we'll come back with paperwork." Malik took one step forward. "Then come back," he said. "Until then, you're trespassing." There was a flicker, just a split second, where the second deputy's hand moved. Not quite to draw, but not far from it either. Malik saw it, calculated it, and said nothing. Rowland adjusted his belt and glanced toward the barn. The old farmhouse, the recently repaired fencing. "Lot of history here," he mused. "Be a shame if the county had to get involved. You folks got kids, don't you?" That was it. The line, the warning wrapped in politeness, and Jasmine felt it like a thunderclap. Because when they couldn't scare you with fines or lawsuits, they threatened what mattered, more your family. "You can go now," she said, voice low but clear, "or I start recording." Rowland looked at Malik again, longer this time. Something about the way Malik stood, the quiet certainty in his shoulders, the unreadable eyes, unnerved him. He nodded once. "We'll be back," Rowland said. And they left, slowly, watching that night. The farmhouse was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creaking of the old porch swing. Jasmine sat at the table while Malik uploaded the day's footage to a private server. Every conversation was saved, every face recorded, every badge number logged. "We should go public," Jasmine said finally. "This can't stay local. We're not the only ones." Malik looked up. "It's not safe. It's not safe not to," she replied. The next morning Jasmine made a post, a simple video. No theatrics, just her, standing on her porch, holding her grandmother's quilt in her hands, and her voice steady. "My name is Jasmine Carter. I'm a single mother of 2, and I live on land my great-great-grandfather bought after the Civil War. For over 100 years, my family has worked this soil. We've paid our taxes, we've raised our children, and now, developers want it. The county wants it, and they're trying to scare us off." She paused, "But we're not leaving." She uploaded it and walked away from the screen. Within 12 hours, the video had over 8,000 views. By nightfall, local news outlets were emailing her. By the next morning, civil rights attorneys were calling, but with the attention came more pressure. The following week, Jasmine received a letter from the county, a citation for an unauthorized outbuilding, the chicken coop her father had rebuilt 5 years ago. A second letter claimed her well water failed a surprise inspection. A third arrived just 3 days later, Child Protective Services, requesting a visit based on an anonymous concern about homeschooling and safety. That one nearly broke her. She clutched Zoe and Mason tightly that night, tears silent and hot. For the first time, she felt not just targeted, but exposed, vulnerable in a way that no camera could shield. They were trying to dismantle her from the inside out. Malik sat across from her in the dim light of the living room. He didn't speak until the kids were asleep. "This is how they win," he said softly. "They take people piece by piece, not with noise but with slow pressure, paper cuts, rumors, delays, until one day you're too tired to fight." Jasmine stared at him. "How do we fight back?" He leaned forward. "We stop playing defense." The next morning, Malik made a series of calls, military contacts, old friends from shadowed corners of the world, not to strike back with violence, but with strategy, surveillance, counterintelligence. Tasha had already started mapping out nearby land purchases. 3 shell companies, she told them, all tied to Horizon West, all buying up land under different names. "This isn't just Oakwood, it's half the county." Jasmine reached out to the local news station that had contacted her earlier. This time, she agreed to a full interview, on live television. She sat with the anchor and told her story calmly, clearly, backed by documentation. She spoke of the code violations, the intimidation, the history of her family's farm. She didn't ask for sympathy, she demanded accountability. The video went viral. More families came forward. People who'd been quiet for fear of retaliation suddenly found courage in her voice. A retired couple who'd been fighting foreclosure in the next town. A young veteran whose land had been condemned after he refused to sell. A single father whose permits were mysteriously revoked days after refusing an offer. And amid all this, something shifted. One morning, Jasmine opened her front door and found a package on the porch. No name, no return address. Inside, a faded photograph, black and white, her great-great-grandfather standing with a Union soldier, smiling. Behind them, the original farmhouse, smaller, but unmistakable. On the back, in elegant script, "Stand firm. You were born on sacred ground." She clutched the photo to her chest, and knew, without a doubt, that the battle wasn't just for land, it was for memory, for truth, for every name etched into this soil. The morning after the interview aired, Jasmine woke to the sound of tires on gravel again, but this time, when she stepped onto the porch, it wasn't deputies, developers, or threats disguised as protocol. It was a line of cars, minivans, pickups, hybrids, people stepping out slowly, carefully, some with folded lawn chairs, others with toolboxes. One woman wore an apron, carrying a tray of cornbread. An older man in overalls had a tattered American flag folded under his arm, and not one of them came to offer pity. They came to help. Word had spread faster than she could have imagined. The video of her interview, where she stood firm and said, "Enough," had ricocheted across social media, passed from timeline to timeline like a spark, chasing dry kindling. And somewhere in that chain, people had seen something more than one family's fight. They saw a mirror. They saw themselves. A retired electrician stepped up and introduced himself. "Name's Dwight. You said your generator wiring was old. I'd be happy to take a look." A young woman, no older than 22, adjusted her camera on a tripod, on live streaming the whole day. "If they show up again, we want it documented." Even the Eddings family showed up. Mr. Eddings with his cane, his son and grandkids with gardening gloves. "It's not just your legacy they're after," he said, "it's all of ours. They just started with you because you were alone. Only now." She WASN single quotes T. Malik stood off to the side of the porch, arms crossed, watching as the yard slowly transformed into something that looked less like a standoff and more like a rally. His face was unreadable, but Jasmine could tell. The soldier in him was measuring every angle, every move, every soul who walked up that driveway. But it was the heart of a brother that made him nod, just slightly, at the sight of his sister surrounded by community. They worked all day. Repairs were made. The garden was expanded. A new fence post line was marked. And all around the farm, handmade signs began to appear. "Land of the free stays free. You can't bulldoze legacy. We're watching too." The kids painted one that read, "This is our home." But hope always seems to invite pushback. By sunset, as the volunteers wrapped up and Jasmine handed out lemonade, Malik's burner phone buzzed. A message from Tasha. "They're planning something. Tonight." He showed it to Jasmine. "They don't want the press. They don't want confrontation. But they'll still come. Just like they did with the others. Quiet, after dark. Jasmine looked out at her quiet land. Her children played with 2 neighborhood kids beneath the sycamore. Fireflies blinked lazily in the tall grass. Everything looked peaceful, but Malik was right. It was the quiet before something. So they prepared. Tasha and her team set up motion sensors at the edge of the north and west woods. Drones were launched overhead, silent as owls. Every trail cam was checked, re-angled. SYNCED. Jasmine called the families who had come earlier and asked them to stay home that night. She didn't want anyone else getting caught in what was coming. Midnight came like a held breath. Then movement. Malik saw it first. A shimmer on the security feed. 2 men, dark clothing, no headlights. One at the generator, one near the barn. A third silhouette appeared further out at the well. They moved like people who'd done this before. Quick, confident. Legal lines blurred in their wake, but they weren't alone. Without a word, Malik slipped out the back door, radio clipped to his shirt. Tasha flanked the east side. 2 of her team looped silently around the southern fence. Jasmine stayed inside, watching the feeds with her heart thudding like a drumbeat. Every shadow on the screen felt personal now. Every movement was a direct insult to the hands that had tilled this land for generations. Then, suddenly, light. A spotlight snapped on from the barn, triggered by the motion detector. 1 man froze, the other cursed and took off toward the woods. And then, a voice echoed across the field. Not loud, not angry, just steady. You're trespassing on private land. We have footage. We have names. You won't make us disappear. It was Jasmine. She had stepped onto the porch, her phone camera live, voice calm as steel. The man near the well stopped in his tracks, but Malik stepped from the shadows, not rushing, just walking directly into the floodlight's beam, calm, controlled, his dog tags glinting under the light. One of the intruders turned and ran. The others didn't. Tasha's team was already closing in. No violence, no threats, just presence. It was enough. Within minutes, the shadows vanished back into the trees, but Jasmine knew this wouldn't be the last time. By dawn, news vans were already at the end of the driveway. Someone had tipped off. A regional affiliate. Drones from the press hovered overhead now too. One of the intruders had dropped a phone. Another had been filmed from 3 different angles. Jasmine stood on the porch again, exhausted but unbroken. They're still trying, she said. Malik nodded. And we're still here. Then, a surprise. A silver car pulled up the drive. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, sharp suit, eyes kind but calculating. She introduced herself as Maya Washington, a civil rights attorney from Atlanta. She'd seen Jasmine's story, and she wasn't just there to offer legal help. She had a folder. Inside were land deeds, property maps, case studies, evidence that what was happening wasn't isolated and wasn't legal. This isn't about zoning, she said. It's about targeting. We have enough to bring this to court, not just to defend your land, but to expose how many others have already lost theirs in silence. Jasmine took the folder with trembling hands. This started as a farm, she whispered. Now it's something else. Maya nodded. Now it's a movement. By the end of that week, Jasmine's story was on national television. Malik's face stayed out of the spotlight by design, but his presence remained the spine of every quiet shot. Tasha's team expanded their surveillance to nearby farms, still holding out. Maya assembled a coalition of lawyers, historians, and journalists, and slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. But Jasmine knew this was only the beginning. The courtroom was colder than Jasmine expected, not just from the air conditioning, but from the way silence pressed down on everything, like a held breath waiting to see who would speak first. It had taken months to get here, months of letters, threats, warnings disguised as legal jargon, months of CPS visits, soil inspections, mysterious car breakdowns, and local government delays. But now, at last, it wasn't whispers in back offices or deputies skulking around at night. It was open, public, and undeniable. Maya Washington sat beside Jasmine at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by neatly stacked binders and a single framed photo, the one Jasmine had received anonymously. Her great-great-grandfather and the Union soldier, a silent reminder of what this was all truly about. Across the aisle sat the county's legal team, 6 people deep, sharp suits, laptops glowing. One wore a pin for Horizon West on his lapel, bold, unapologetic. But Jasmine didn't flinch. because when the judge entered and called the case to order, the gallery behind her was filled, shoulder to shoulder, with neighbors, reporters, farmers, veterans, and strangers who now called her sister in the fight. And Malik, always, Malik back row, still watchful. Maya opened. Her voice was calm but unyielding. She painted a picture not of a single case, but of a pattern, a campaign of slow erasure. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about more than land," she said. "It's about legacy. It's about a family farm that has survived Reconstruction, Jim Crow, segregation, and generations of struggle, only to now face a new, quieter, kinder removal, one masked in legalese, but driven by greed." She slid a photo across the table, an aerial shot showing the Taylor farm surrounded by construction. Ask yourself, why is this the only property being targeted for obscure violations? Why was Child Protective Services called twice after Miss Taylor refused to sell? Why were records of zoning changes mysteriously updated only after Horizon West made offers? The judge listened intently, and Jasmine, she breathed, not because it was over, but because for the first time she wasn't the one carrying it all alone. The county's lawyer rose, clearing his throat. His strategy was clear: paint Jasmine as combative, paranoid, emotional. He spoke of reasonable concern for child welfare, of outdated infrastructure, of coincidences in zoning re-evaluation. He even called her combustible for allowing so many protesters onto her land. But Jasmine had come prepared. Every CPS report had been closed without finding cause. Every zoning citation was dated after Jasmine's public refusal to sell, and every claim they made unraveled, thread by thread, under Maya's quiet, relentless cross-examination. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Tasha entered the courtroom, mid-session, with a USB drive in her palm. Jasmine recognized the look in her eyes, a storm held behind calm. The judge allowed the footage to be played. It was drone video from the night of the break-in, clear, undeniable. 3 individuals in county maintenance gear tampering with Jasmine's well at night, without notice, with tools that matched those used by Horizon West's site team. The courtroom was silent, except for the audio. A snippet of conversation caught by a body mic Tasha had planted. "Just finish this and get out. We can't have her suing now. They want her out by winter." Jasmine didn't look at the screen. She watched the jury. Instead, some leaned forward. Others turned to glance at the defense table. It wasn't just suspicion. Now, it was proof. And still, the most powerful moment hadn't come yet. After days of testimony, exhibits, and expert witnesses, the judge allowed Jasmine to speak, not as a witness, but as the voice of the land. She stood slowly, holding the quilt. Again, she didn't read from notes. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply told the story of her great-great-grandfather, who bought the land with wages earned building railroads in the South, of her parents, who died on that bridge with clean records, no skid marks, and too many questions left unanswered, of her children, who had learned to walk on that soil, whose laughter once echoed through rows of corn and fields of wildflowers. She paused, then told them about the letter she found in her mother's keepsake box, one she hadn't shared with anyone yet, a handwritten will signed by her great-grandmother. In 1968. Whoever finds this, if you are reading this, it means we're still here. Keep us here. Keep us alive. Not just in name, but in purpose. And in that moment, the courtroom no longer felt like a legal proceeding. It felt like a reckoning. Outside, crowds gathered. News vans rolled live. Hashtags like #StandWithJasmine and #ThisLandLives trended across the country. People began to post their own family land stories. Stories of loss. Stories of defiance. Stories of inheritance, not in dollars but in roots. Jasmine's case became more than a lawsuit. It became a movement. Still, the judge recessed for deliberation. They waited. Hours passed. In the courthouse hallway, Malik leaned against a pillar, arms folded. Jasmine sat across from him, her hand around Mason's, Zoe asleep on her lap. "You think we did enough?" she asked quietly. Malik didn't answer immediately. "Then, we did what they never expected. We stayed." The doors reopened. Court resumed. The judge's ruling was delivered in a quiet voice, but its impact roared. All citations dismissed. All trespassers to be investigated. County to cease all activity related to property reassessment. Temporary injunction against Horizon West on any nearby acquisitions. And one line that Jasmine would never forget: "This land has spoken, through its stewards, and this court hears it loud and clear." Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet, because she knew this was just the first victory. The victory was real, but peace didn't arrive with it. In the weeks after the court ruling, Jasmine found herself in the eye of a growing storm. News crews rotated like clockwork at the end of her gravel drive. Her inbox overflowed with letters, some filled with gratitude, others with veiled threats. Politicians reached out with offers to partner on initiatives that sounded more like press grabs than purpose. Her life, once defined by the quiet rhythm of planting and harvest, had turned into a symbol, a flashpoint, and she hadn't asked for any of it. What she had asked for was a chance to breathe. So one early morning, with the sky still purple and the dew fresh on the fields, Jasmine walked out to the oldest part of the farm, past the orchard beyond the pond, to the grove where time seemed to slow. She hadn't been there in years. Her father used to call it the forgotten corner, shaded by towering oaks, the ground covered in soft moss and curling roots. That's where she saw it, a stone, half buried, weathered, marked with initials she barely recognized. ET-1902. Her breath caught. She dropped to her knees and brushed the soil gently. More stones, smaller ones, sunken into the earth, like sleeping memories. It wasn't just a grove, it was a burial site. Family, hidden, preserved, untouched by developers, untouched even by memory. Jasmine stood slowly, heart pounding, not with fear but awe. This land had been talking long before she ever raised her voice in court, and now it was telling her something even deeper. This fight was never just about saving something old. It was about protecting something sacred. She brought Malik there later. That afternoon, he knelt beside the largest stone and ran his fingers across the etched letters. His face was quiet, but Jasmine could see the shift in his eyes. "We need to document this," he said. "Not just document," Jasmine replied. "Honor." Word spread quickly. Within days, local historians and archivists arrived. They confirmed what Jasmine suspected. It was one of the oldest African-American family cemeteries in the county, possibly the state. Entire generations were laid to rest here quietly, without fanfare, because history hadn't made room for them anywhere else. But here, on this land, they had been remembered, kept protected, and now they would be known. A formal preservation process began. The Taylor farm was nominated for the National Register of Historic Places. Civil rights organizations amplified the story. Documentary filmmakers reached out, and the tone of the public changed, not from interest to curiosity, but from curiosity to reverence, because this wasn't just one woman's stand, it was the unveiling of a hidden chapter in American history. And Jasmine, once seen as a lone mother fighting off greedy developers, now stood as the keeper of a living monument. Still, even with recognition and support, Jasmine knew the battle had only changed shape. Developers now tried other means, buying nearby land to box her in, lobbying for rezoning again, trying to paint her as obstructionist for refusing new roadways and infrastructure that would threaten the integrity of the grove. But she had learned, and she wasn't standing alone. Tasha launched a non-profit, Rising, with the mission to identify and protect black-owned land across the South. Malik became its silent sentinel, training volunteers in surveillance, self-defense, and tactical community readiness. He never liked the spotlight, but people listened when he spoke. And Jasmine, she became a voice at universities, at town halls, in communities like hers that thought they were forgotten. Every time she'd tell the story, not of injustice alone, but of the fire that grows in silence, the power of standing when it's hardest, the legacy that lives in soil, sweat, and sacrifice. Then came the letter. Folded, plain, no return address. Inside was a photograph, old, sepia-toned, her great-great-grandfather standing beside a man in Union blues. On the back, in faded cursive, "He gave me land. I gave him my oath that we would always protect it." Tears welled in her eyes, because it wasn't just land, it was a promise, passed down through blood and time, and she, Jasmine Taylor, daughter, sister, mother, was keeping it. 1 year later, the Taylor farm hosted a community festival, the Day of the Roots. People came from counties away. Descendants of those buried in the grove brought flowers. Children played among rows of corn. Veterans saluted the small flag planted beside the oldest tree. Songs were sung. Stories were shared. and as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the fields, Jasmine stood at the heart of it all, hand in hand with Zoe and Mason, Malik at her side. "This is what they tried to take," she whispered. "And this," Malik replied, "is what they can never touch." Because sometimes the most powerful stand doesn't come with shouting or fists. It comes when you plant your feet on sacred ground and refuse to move.